In this daily drop, it's part 2 of my double net exploration, so let's go. All right, fine people of the interwebs, I am back at it here in the barn, and definitely in exploration and testing mode, and have been spending the morning doing some tests with what is behind me, which are 3 different double nets, and not all designed for the same exact purpose, but what I wanted to do was, after ordering this very inexpensive from CineGearFactory 8x8 double net, kind of get a sense of where that sits compared to some of the other stuff on the market. So behind me, I have a RoadRags II 24x36 right there, which is really just to slow down and control light. So the purpose isn't for that to be behind talent. So you'll see some differences with that particular product, potentially, probably. Over here, I'm looking at the monitor to give myself reference, is a 6x6 double net from FJ Westcott, which I use all of the time. And then over here is the 8x8 double net from CineGearFactory. Now, there's a few things that I want to just point out before I talk about what I'm going to do here in terms of testing. And the first one is that I mentioned in yesterday's episode that the CineGearFactory 8x8 was supposed to be seamless. It does, in fact, have a seam, which you'll probably see more clearly when I move it into position. And it says it's seamless on the website. So that's the first thing. The second thing is it is supposed to have corner, basically elastic components, so you can just put those over a frame and then you can tie it down with the grommets on the system. And the tie downs that it came with are basically very short shoelaces. So a little strange, not your standard rope that you would expect, a little janky when it comes to kind of tying it down, especially because it's so thin and doesn't have a lot of structure. But what I'm doing is I have ordered a second one, because when I ordered this first one over here from B&H, there seemed to only be one in stock, and then they went out of stock, and now they're back in stock. So tomorrow or the next day, I should be getting a replacement. I've also emailed the company asking them about the seamless component, the elastic in the corners, and the fact that the netting that's in there, the bobbinet, I guess is how you call it, is lined up perfectly with each other. So I don't think we're getting the same amount of light loss. But this will tell the story, and I apologize if this is a slightly longer episode, but sometimes this is what you've got to do to kind of figure stuff out. So what I've done here is I've increased my key light to be just slightly brighter than normal. I've reduced my ISO on my camera, and basically I'm set up at a 23.976 or 23.98 in terms of frame rate. I'm set to 180 degree shutter, 800 ISO, and what I have here is the L478D light meter from Sekonic, and I've set that to basically match my settings on my camera. Now, there are things to talk about when you're using a light meter like this, and that's not this episode. But effectively what a light meter is doing is it's trying to give you a reading based on where you take that reading for a correct exposure, based on where middle gray should fall. So if I take a reading right now of where I am from here, I'm getting an f2.8. So in order to expose properly for my camera settings, we'll just say 24 frames per second, 180 degree shutter, or at a 48th shutter speed, and at an 800 ISO, I should be in f2.8, which is what I'm actually set to. But there are so many variables now in camera systems, again, a bigger subject. When you're setting it up to a particular picture profile, picture style, you're shooting in log, you might be shooting raw, and the way your dynamic range is getting mapped, that it's not always going to just be cut and dry, take a reading, but this is going to get us in the ballpark. I think it might be just a third of a stop over or so, but I'm going to leave it the way it is. The pie's ready. I forgot to mute my phone before we did this, so I'm just going to turn it off. Okay, so an f2.8 here, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to put whatever net material I'm going to be using and taking readings with approximately 6 feet back from where I am right now. So we'll be dipping to black, and I'll be first testing the 2x3 from Matthews, then I'll test the 6x6 from Westcott, and then I'll test the 8x8 from CineGearFactory. And I'll be taking readings in terms of what stop reading I'm getting right in front of the net and then right behind it, so we can see how much light loss there is. And I may, for giggles, also take the C800 and do a color temperature reading to see how much the color temperature is changing from in front of and behind the net. And I'll talk about some other stuff. So let me go ahead and dip to black, and I'll have the little RoadRags II set up, and we'll do our initial readings. All right, kids, so I'm going to try to make this as streamlined as possible because this is going to be a long episode no matter what. Right here in front of me, I have the 2x3 RoadRags II double net. And if you can kind of see, it has a little bit of a color cast. Its purpose is not to be in frame. This is not something that I would use behind talent. So it's serving a different purpose than if I was using a 6x6 or an 8x8, maybe even a 4x4 double net. So this is really for doing things like slowing down light on somebody's shirt or feathering light a little bit and just controlling how much light is falling on certain places, but without creating too much of a difference in terms of color cast. I kind of like to call nets ND for the world, but this is a little bit different in purpose. I don't think we'll see a big color temperature swing here, but I'm going to go ahead and read it. I'm going to place this right now about 6 feet away from me where my mark is for everything. I'll take a reading with the regular ambient light meter and get a reading of what my exposure should be based on my camera settings. Again, I'm shooting at a, just say 24 frames per second at 180-degree shutter at an 800 ISO, and it's going to try to give me a reading for where it thinks I should set things for correct exposure for middle gray. And then I'll take the C800 color meter. I'll also do a meter reading in front of and behind the net so we can see if there's any color temperature difference. So let me go ahead and do that. Here we go. Okay. You should be able to hear me. And I'm going to go ahead and take a reading here. And I'm getting an f1.4 for my reading here, which is a two-stop difference between here at a 2.8 and where the net is, just so you can kind of get a sense of what the light fall off is based on my setup right now. And I'll take a reading behind. And I'm getting an f.7 and 2/10. So unless I have that Zeiss planar lens, that 50 millimeter that I think they used on the moon and maybe for a Kubrick film, I'm probably not going to have a lens that's going to give me that exposure on the other side of the net. But we're basically looking at over 1.5 stops of difference. And Matthews says that their double net is about a 1 stop difference from basically, you know, light before and after. But there's a lot of factors involved. Ambient, light, the source that you're using, so on and so forth. This is literally just taking a reading of this key source coming this way and seeing the difference in front of and behind the net. And then color temperature wise. All right, let's see what we've got. I've got 5445 in terms of Kelvin, so just under 5500 Kelvin. And then 5600 Kelvin, or 5601 to be exact. And so we're looking at about 150 Kelvin difference between one side of the net and the other. Not a huge difference, so pretty neutral, still basically ND for the world. And now what I want to do is dip to black. I'm going to bring in the 6x6 double net from Westcott, and we'll see what the readings are with that. Okie dokie, here we are, the 6x6 behind me from Westcott, and this is kind of my go-to double net. I have that on a 6x Scrim Jim Cine frame, but it's 6 feet away, which is at least about as far away as I'd like to have a double net and not have moire issues. It's not quite wide enough for even this kind of medium frame that I have, which is precisely the reason I'm looking for an 8x8. And in the end, I might just wind up getting the 8x8 from Westcott, but it's worth a shot to try this other one from CineGearFactory. Now, I don't need to take a reading in front of the net because it's in the same position. We know that's an f1.4. So let me take a reading on the other side, also take a color temperature reading in front of and behind the net, and we can see if there's any difference there. And this is a little bit more true in terms of it being and reading black in terms of the netting, but let me go ahead and do that. Okay, 0.8 and 1/10. Not a lot different than the Matthews one in terms of the stop difference. So definitely over 1.5 stops, not quite 2. We're sort of in that 1.5 to 1 2/3 stop range. Yeah. All right, hold on. Let me do color temperature. Oh, really, I don't need to take one from the front here, too. We know that that's 54, basically 50. And then from behind the net, so 54.45 and then 54.38. So we're talking just not about a 10 Kelvin degree difference. So as I thought, a very neutral net with the double net from Westcott. And about the same light loss as the double net from Matthews. So we're getting somewhere here. It's now time to bring in that larger 8x8 and see what the deal is with that CineGearFactory double net. All right, I've got the 8x behind me, plenty wide to take up the whole frame, and still very neutral. The one thing that is irking me a little, and we'll see if the replacement one that I'm getting is going to be any different, is about 2 feet up on this, there is a definite seam, and it's supposed to be seamless. But let's take the readings and see what we've got. To my eye, we're going to get less light loss on the other side of this net. Interested to see both the readings for aperture, ambient, light levels, and then also for color. So let me go ahead and do that. Okay, my eyes don't lie. First of all, 1.4 in front of the net, and then an f1 and 1/10 behind the net. So considerably different in terms of light loss between the two. Definitely feeling like we're more in that stop range for the CineGearFactory, and I definitely like to eke it out a little bit more. This is reading at basically what Matthews would say their double net should be doing in terms of light loss, but it's definitely, in terms of the Matthews one on that RoadRags II, a heavier rag. That netting that is doubled up, and I do want to just disclaim that with the fact that I've had those RoadRags II for a very, very, very long time. So that coloration and stuff also may be based on time, being outside in the sun, being in different work environments. So it's not just cut and dry in terms of that. Color temperature wise, very, very little difference, very, very neutral. The CineGearFactory coming in at about 20 Kelvin difference between in front of and behind the double net. So the question is, will the replacement 8x8 that I'm getting have the same issues with the shoelace tie downs, with the seam about 2 feet up or in terms of the 8x8, and then also still missing? Or maybe we'll get the elastic on the corners, which is very advantageous when you're quickly trying to skin a frame and then tie it down with the grommets. So we'll see what happens. I will report back on that replacement 8x8. Hopefully these findings are useful to you. I like doing this kind of stuff when I have the time because it lets me learn what these different tools are and how I can use them in production. Honestly, if that 8x8 shows up, and even if it's just a stop of light loss and it has no seam, for $45 and really $90 for the pair, $45 for the double net black, $45 for the double net white, it's kind of a no-brainer. But I'm still really considering an 8x8 double net from Westcott. It just works. There's some others from other manufacturers as well, but that's what I got for you. Don't forget to, and to, and I'll see you on the next episode of The Daily Drop.